Hi, this is Bradley David Good. This is called The Isolated Swiss of the Loetschental Valley, and a little bit about high meat and a reading from my journal. So my journals were written in the winter of 18 and 19, I believe. It started in December of 2018, and I started reading at that time the book Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Weston A. Price, DDS, written in 1939. And on the end of the first page of my journal is this entry: The Isolated Swiss of the Loetschental Valley, 1931 to 32. This group of 2,000 people were isolated in a valley of 3 mountains that were almost impassable due to snow and landslides. A tunnel and railroad making them now accessible were recently completed. They lived almost entirely on locally produced food. Their culture was rich in good values and not materialistic. They did not have a dentist, doctor, police, or jail, and had no need for these things. Their young people were some of the strongest and fittest in the world. At a time when tuberculosis was the most serious disease of Switzerland, the valley had no cases. The hay grew fast and was much higher in nutrients. Hay fed the cattle, and rye was produced for the people. Children attended good schools 6 months of the year and helped with the farms the remainder of the year. There were no trucks, tractors, horses, or wagons. All was carried by people. They would make butter and cheese. The butter was especially dense in nutrients and tasty in June due to the cattle grazing in the highlands near the glaciers. They had butter ceremonies this time of year. Their diet was largely a slice of whole rye bread and a piece of summer-made cheese the size of the bread, eaten with fresh raw milk of goats and cows. Meat was eaten about once a week. The minerals, vitamins, and nutrition in their foods was much higher than modern foods. The animal and dairy fats and fat activators contributed greatly to the absorption of these nutrients. The children would play bareheaded and barefooted in the evening's chilly breezes in streams of water from the glaciers in weather that required Dr. Price to wear a coat, gloves, and button his collar. They had wonderful celebrations, great community spirit, and a song that says, "One for all and all for one." Doors did not need to be bolted in the valley. And this is my comment. I just finished reading Walden by Henry David Thoreau. During his time at Walden, he primarily ate rye and what he called Indian meal. I wonder how healthy whole rye is, and may try to find products at the local health store made of 100% rye. Lately I've been going out in the cold more without as much on. I recently listened to Wise Traditions podcast 161, which I'll link below, which talks about exposure. For years I have taken opportunities to jump into very cold water and have felt that it revitalized me and improved my health. I also finish my hot shower each morning with a cold shower. This morning I went for my normal walk with my dog and a hat, but no gloves and no coat in 20 degrees Fahrenheit. This walk is about a mile to the pond in the park and back. When I got to the pond, I removed my boots and socks and ground my bare feet down past the leaves and into the dirt and stood in the sun for 10 to 15 minutes, It felt good. This is grounding electrically or earthing, and also acclimating the body to the cold. We often try to protect the body too much from things that will inspire it to be stronger. This includes bacteria. I have recently learned from Agnes von der Planitz in the book We Want to Live that bacteria, viruses, pathogens, and parasites are the garbage collectors of the body and that we need more of them. This is why yogurt and fermented foods like sauerkraut are good for our gut and health. I have for many months now been eating raw dairy products like A2 milk, cream, and kefir, no salt butter and no salt cheese, and raw unrefrigerated fertile eggs. The Chinese eat century eggs. All of these foods are full of active live cultures or bacteria. I have also been eating raw, wild, and pastured organic meats and seafood. I feel really good when I do and crave the raw meat. I often transfer the meat to a glass container with airspace to let it age in the fridge for weeks. Every few days I take it out and open it on the counter for up to an hour to let new bacteria and air get to it. Some steaks I have eaten raw with my hands have been so delicious that my eyes rolled back in my head. I feel like an animal driven by primal instinct, tearing the meat with my teeth. December 9th, 2018. I have noticed that I am warmer when I eat raw dairy fats and pastured tallows. Yesterday was my third day eating a marble-sized piece of high meat, high in bacteria, and makes you feel high. I had skipped the day before yesterday. The days that I have eaten high meat, I have felt much better digestion. Things move better. My sinuses and head have been much clearer. I have been happier and have felt the high that people talk about. The second day was the most noticeable. I felt a lot like a high from cannabis, but clear-minded and in the body and mind, not just the head. I was talking to a friend at work by Skype text, and I was full of life and jokes came easily. I feel the bacteria from the high meat make its way through my body, from my mouth, through my digestive tract to the exit. It feels gently cleansing and very comforting. I am sleeping longer and more soundly. I have pleasant dreams and feel more comfortable in bed and less stiff. It is as if the comforting, cleansing, and healing of the gut is translating into a comforting and healing of the entire body and mind. I feel more peaceful and content. I woke up much more refreshed and clear-minded, ready for the day and its activities. I have been making my own kefir for a month or two now. It started from kefirs that I bought. One was a coconut kefir and one was cow's milk kefir. I would drink some and then replace the coconut milk or cow's milk with more as needed. Sometimes I would remove them from the fridge and let them sit on the counter for hours or overnight if I felt that I wanted it stronger. I eventually combined the two. I used a wide-mouth quart mason jar and now just add raw milk as needed, often the bottom of the bottle that has begun to sour a little. I learned later that kefir can be made by taking fresh raw milk from pastured animals and placing it in the cupboard for a day or two. I do, however, like that I started with some that I purchased because it may have added to the complexity of the cultures. I leave the lid off of the jar and sometimes take it outside to get more fresh air and bacteria into it, just as I do with the high meat. It is recommended to do this daily or about every 3 days. Yesterday for breakfast, I had some fruit and a little raw cocoa butter wafers. For a late lunch, I had about a cup of A2 milk, 1 raw unrefrigerated pastured fertile egg, vanilla extract, and about a cup of kefir whipped together by hand. The mixture was 1 pint, and then a marble-sized piece of high meat. My wife Mary had her first high meat and a raw lamb heart she ate with her hands. Later in the afternoon, we went to the health food store and I asked if they had anything with 100% rye. I had never before been able to find something that was 100%. Sure enough, they had a dense, thinly sliced, 100% whole rye bread that even was made with sea salt. When my wife and I came home, we spread A2 raw no salt butter on it thickly and ate some. It was delicious. I had more. Later in the early evening, I was walking in the park with a dog walking friend, Donna, and my dog Otto's favorite dog friend, Jax. I was telling Donna about the rye bread and butter. She was very interested, so I invited her in to have some after the walk. I also served a small glass of raw milk. She loved it and commented how great it tasted in the mouth and how the bread, butter, and milk reminded her of the good stuff she had as a child. When she left, I had some more. It was as if I was craving the starch of the rye bread with the fat of the butter in order to bind with the garbage that the high meat and kefir cultures were removing from my body. The Spirit was telling me this, and I followed, even though I usually don't eat grains at all. This morning the Spirit told me to look up high meat again in Ajna's book, We Want to Live, and in Appendix L, he talks about this starch thing along with many other important details about depression and blood sugar and how to balance blood sugar and moods with the right combination of high meat, raw meat, fruit, raw fats, and starch, and how the raw fat and starch binds things in the bowels for elimination. For a late dinner, I was led to eat a large salad and then a bowl of rice with raw butter. I also ate a plain, hard corn tortilla because I was still craving that starch thing. Ajna recommends eating the starch with a little fresh fruit in the afternoon, and he says that starch is less preferred to raw meat. I think that I needed more starch yesterday because I am early on in my consumption of high bacteria and needed all of that bulk to bind things in transit. Today I plan to have more raw meat than yesterday, some fresh raw lamb kidneys, and another piece of high meat. I also plan on having a whole coconut, the water, meat, and all, with a banana and some pineapple in the food processor around midday, maybe along with the meats and a cup of kefir. And at some point today, I will probably have more rye and butter. I wish I had some no-salt raw Swiss cheese to have on rye bread, like the Swiss from the Valley in Dr. Price's book. I have been thinking about their meal of rye with cheese and milk since I read it, and have been craving it greatly. I really feel satisfied with these foods and milk since I've read it and have been craving, I really feel satisfied with these foods, and I know that this is what my body needs and has been craving for so long. I am very excited about the immediate results physically and mentally in just a few days since introducing the high meat and increasing the raw fats and dairy drastically. My high meat is 1 month old. I have 3 jars, beef, turkey, and chicken fat. I plan to add 2 more jars, chicken muscle meat and fish. Other ideas are organ meats like liver, kidney, and heart as they become available freshly butchered from my farm. I try to get all of my meats fresh, not frozen, because this keeps the bacteria and enzymes intact. There are 17 stages of bacteria growth. This is why it is important not to interrupt it and to give the meat and kefir fresh air regularly. Since ancient times, cultures such as Eskimos and Africans have drank salmonella and E. coli daily in raw milk. Eskimos would bury their meat for up to 6 weeks. They would consume it to boost their mood for aches and pains and to increase endurance. Parasites also have a symbiotic relationship in our bodies, consuming large amounts of degenerative tissue in short periods. Everything in nature has its place and function, and nothing should be feared or destroyed, but rather, everything kept in balance produces a wonderful natural harmony. Chemicals, drugs, pollution, and harmful foods destroy this balance and make much more detoxification necessary with its associated undesirable symptoms. When I eat the high meat, the consistency is so good in my mouth, a bit slimy on the outside and tender as can be all the way through. It reminds me of pate or liverwurst. I feel the strong tingle of the massive amount of cultures filling my mouth, like yogurt or kefir, but much stronger and more cleansing. The medical system and the media have given them ugly names and attached fearful stories of death to them. But I welcome them into my body and immediately experience their pleasant benefits. I feel them travel as the day goes by into the tissues of my mouth and throat, up through the back of my sinuses to the sinuses in my head, and clearing out as they go so beautifully, like no drug could ever do. My head is cool, clear, and tingly clean feeling inside. My brain seems to work much better, way less cloudy. I have more productive thoughts that are clearer and that meet my needs better. I hear more clearly from the Spirit. I am being cleansed and refreshed from the inside by my little friends I am learning to love. Mary, who had her first high meat yesterday, said that she slept much better, it lofted her mood, her elimination was wonderful this morning, and she got up and did some small repairs that she had been putting off for 5 months. She's in a really happy, cheerful mood, feels clear-minded and sharper. Her eyes feel better, not achy. I just passed by the open kefir on my counter. It has been filling the area with a wonderful smell like rising bread. I added a cup of milk from the remainder of the bottle to fill the kefir jar and will leave it out on the counter until later today. I think I may make my own rye bread sometime and add kefir to make it like a sourdough. I talked to my best friend Dan today on the phone, and I told him about how good I was feeling from the high meat. He said that his uncle would eat high meat. He would go hunting, shoot a bird, and hang it out until the feathers fell out, and then would eat it. And now back to the Swiss from the Loetschental Valley. I will directly quote from the book. How different the level of life and horizon of such souls from those in many places in the so-called civilized world in which people have degraded themselves until life has no interest in values that cannot be expressed in gold or pelf, which they would obtain even though the life of the person being cheated or robbed would therefore be crippled or blotted out. One immediately wonders if there is not something in the life-giving vitamins and minerals of the food that builds not only great physical structure within which their souls reside, but builds minds and hearts capable of a higher type of manhood in which the material values of life are made secondary to individual character. In succeeding chapters, we will see evidence that this is the case. End quote. As Dr. Price traveled the towns of the Swiss Alps, he consistently found that those children that were on the traditional diet of whole rye, raw milk products, and some meat had well-formed features and about 3% dental caries. Towns where modern foods, particularly white flour, jams, sugar, and chocolate, had been introduced, had about 30% dental caries. In those same towns, the only children found to have no caries were those on the diet of raw, dairy, and some meat. The tradition was to slaughter an animal, such as a sheep, once a week for a group of families that would each eat some of the meat on Sunday. Then the scraps and bones were used to make soups the remainder of the week. In some of the larger districts where modern foods were eaten, the rate of caries was 80 to 100%. Some of the children 16 years and younger had teeth that were completely decayed to the gum line. Others had badly crowded teeth and poorly formed dental arches. In the more densely populated areas with modern foods and higher rates of caries, the cows were not allowed to roam the pastures but were kept inside in stalls because this caused a higher production of milk. Also noted was that dental caries and tuberculosis were associated. Those groups on the traditional diet with near perfect teeth knew nothing about brushing, flossing, or fluoride. Also, check out the description box down below where I will link the Wise Traditions podcast that I mentioned, and also 3 really nice videos on the Loetschental Valley. It's really beautiful. Check it out. All right. See you later.